You found this video, which means it's time to honor you and hold myself accountable. This is my favorite part of the fantasy football year. This video is amazing. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to go over my biggest hits and my biggest misses from the 2024 fantasy football season, my calls, what I got right, what I got wrong. I believe in reviewing where I went wrong and building off the mistakes that I did make. The number one way to get better is to do this for you guys. I will be pinning this video on my page, not hiding from any takes. Absolutely love it. I hope you guys appreciate it. If you do and love the transparency on this page and are ready for a laugh in this video, hit that like button for me. It would be a great way to kick off the end of the fantasy football season. Here we get to going with this. Jayden Daniels, let's get right into the reaction. He was being drafted as the wide receiver 15, finished as the wide receiver 46. Let's get into how I got that wrong.
Jayden Daniels, and a lot of people are going to have a problem with this, so let me get into it. You can get this guy in the back of the third round. That is an amazing value, and you look at him, you're like, I don't want to do this again. What are we looking at here? But he is one of the most consistent guys in fantasy football.
That did not turn out to be true.
Despite all of the things he's been dealing with. He missed 3 games last season with injury, and honestly, it was more like 5 because he went out of games and then came back in a bunch of them with weird eye injuries, leg injuries, but he really missed 5 games of the season. But despite all those games missed, he still finished with over 1,000 yards receiving, his 3rd year in a row since his rookie year. Since he's been drafted, he's never had a season under 1,000 yards. That's really, really good. Even when Tyreek Hill came to the offense, we thought, oh, he's doomed. Last season he got injured. We thought, oh, he's doomed. Still over 1,000 yards.
We can look at this season. Tyreek's still in the offense. He did not have 1,000 yards despite, I think, only missing 3 games. That did not hold up.
Guess what? Now he's going into his 4th season. Statistically, wide receivers in their 3rd and 4th season have the highest percentage of increase of value, fantasy points, and just boom potential.
Maybe if Tua didn't get injured, that would have been true, but it was not.
It's just a statistical fact. Tua will continue to rip this ball. There's no difference here. He was 4th in passing.
That is true. He actually ended up finishing 8th in passing attempts.
Touchdowns, 2nd in passing yards. And you also do have that very off chance that Tyreek Hill does get injured. Now, you can't predict injuries, but he's 30 years old. That's kind of when the physical prime of wide receivers really starts to tank. I'm not saying Tyreek Hill's a bad pick. He's a great player, great pick. But in Waddle's 1 career game without Tyreek Hill, when he was on the team, he had 28 fantasy points. There is no limit to the ceiling that he has if Tyreek were to miss a game or 2. Jayden Waddle's a fine pick on his own. He's going to stay fully healthy this season, I hope. If he didn't miss those 3 games, causing him to have lower numbers and lower touchdowns, he would have easily been a top 15 wide receiver.
Again, not the strongest take. Half of this was true, but he played the entire season. The offense was struggling too. It did not manage to stay healthy. Everybody, even Tyreek Hill, did not do good. But now let's get into my number 1 biggest hit. My biggest call of the year was Ladd McConkey. You need to be drafting him. He was the wide receiver 43 to start out the year. He finished as the wide receiver 13. Let's get into exactly what my reasoning was in the beginning of the year here.
Ladd McConkey. If you guys have seen any of the previous videos, you know who he is by now. I promise you, by the time the season gets closer, you're going to hear his name all over the place. And he's in that situation where he very well could be the wide receiver 1 for the Chargers. They just drafted him. If we know anything about the Chargers, they lost Keenan Allen, they lost Mike Williams, they lost Austin Eckler, who was getting a very good amount of targets out of the backfield. Yes, they replaced him with Gus Edwards. He's not going to get the same amount of target share that Austin Eckler did. They just don't have target competition. His only competition is Quentin Johnston, DJ Chark, and Josh Reynolds. That is not good. And he also has Justin Herbert throwing him the ball. I know he's had some losing seasons. He's been injured. He hasn't been great, but he's still a very good quarterback and can throw the ball. He's going in the 9th round, even 10th of drafts. Just take him. There's really no L when you take him that low. He's very well easily going to outperform that ADP.
That ended up to be 100% true. Again, he finished almost as a top 10 wide receiver. He really came on in the second half. Even the first 3/4 of the season, he started doing amazing. His season totals were way better than anybody else on this Chargers team, and it was a good call. But another one of my misses here is going to be Jordan Addison. He was the wide receiver 40 coming into the year, pretty much a free price. He finished as the wide receiver 21. I didn't see his value at the wide receiver 40. I'll get into it here, but this was a missed call by a long shot.
Jordan Addison, we need to be running away from this guy pretty much this instant. You look at his stats from last season, and you see he finishes the wide receiver 23 in his rookie year, just shy of 1,000 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. It's pretty decent. But this is what I like to call bubble stats, and his season was in an incubator all year because Justin Jefferson was injured and he missed 7 games. And because of that, in that time that Justin Jefferson was injured, Jordan Addison saw his highest snap percentage, usage rate, target rate, all of the receiver numbers that we want to see in fantasy football. The second he came back after their bye week, all of those numbers went back down to normal, and he averaged 4.5 targets per game. Not even receptions. Those are targets per game. And now, instead of Kirk Cousins leading this offense, which maybe he's not the best quarterback of all time, he had them 4th in passing attempts and 6th in passing touchdowns in the entire NFL. And now they have Sam Darnold as quarterback. And I don't think it's that crazy to say that he's not going to get anywhere near top 5, even top 10 passing efficiency numbers to keep this offense afloat. And Jordan Addison's ADP has been tanking ever since the JJ McCarthy injury that's going to put him out for the entirety of the season. Now, I don't really think JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold is that different of a quarterback as far as fantasy goes and supporting wide receivers. But now he's going as a wide receiver 40 in fantasy football drafts. And you might be looking at this saying, well, everybody's telling me the top 1, 2, 3 round players that I can't be drafting. Why does it matter if I'm getting a 10, 11, 12th round guy not on my team? It doesn't matter. Well, that's actually where you find the Pukas, the Nico Collins of last year. You don't win your leagues in the first 4 rounds. You win them in the middle to late rounds. So you want to know who to avoid to get more shots on goal at those actual upside guys
that is still true, 100%.
Can have the chance to win you a league. Jordan Addison is not that. And just to put the icing on the cake, there is still a possibility that Jordan Addison does get suspended in the later half of the season, which would come around fantasy playoffs, which you do not want to have.
Now, obviously, none of this ended up being true. Sam Darnold was one of the best quarterbacks as far as efficiency goes in the NFL. Yes, the passing volume wasn't there. We were right about that. But the efficiency, he was top 5 in passing yards despite being about in the middle of the NFL in passing attempts. Jordan Addison didn't have a consistent breakout, but every single week he came out, he did what he had to do, finished as the wide receiver 20. Not the greatest finish, but if you're being drafted as the wide receiver 40, that is definitely a miss in my book. I'd take that for being wrong. But here's another take that I got right, one that I was very, very high on. Again, all of these videos are still up. You guys can go look through whatever you want if you don't believe me. Marvin Harrison was one of my least drafted guys that I was telling you guys not to draft. He was being drafted as the wide receiver 11 in the first round, a little bit back of the second if you got him there, but he finished as the wide receiver 30. Let's get into what my reasoning was in the beginning of the year and see if it held up for the exact same reasons.
Marvin Harrison, oh no, I do not like his value. And this is a little bit tough to understand and a little bit tough to just internalize myself because we all loved him coming into the season. He's really good. I understand that. He's on a pretty decent team with the Cardinals. Kyler Murray is not a bad quarterback by any means. He is more than capable of supporting a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. But the risk specifically is just so high compared to where we're drafting him at. Let me show you. His ADP is a wide receiver 10 as a rookie, which means he's about an early second round pick. And I could see him sneaking all the way into the end of the first round.
That's exactly what happened. Wide receiver 10, that much worse than the wide receiver 11.
As the season gets closer, and again, this has to do with opportunity cost. He's being drafted around a really good zone of wide receivers where we can really go any direction. You got guys like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Puka, even Nico Collins if you'd want him. Not really, though, he's kind of farther down the line. But he is consistently being drafted over all of these wide receivers who arguably have the same upside as he does, and he is a rookie, so it's going to carry a lot more risk. Let's say you don't want a wide receiver. There's also a really good group of running backs around his ADP, like Jahmyr Gibbs, like Kyron Williams, like JT. So just the opportunity cost of him finishing as like a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy and returning his value that you're drafting him that early at is a pretty low chance. And with your first 2 picks in your first 2 rounds of fantasy football, you relatively want to stay somewhat safe and get a lot of your upside guys in the later rounds because they build the base of your team. And with him trending up, probably going to be taken in the back half of the first round, I really don't see a world where I can be comfortable taking him over all of these elite running backs and wide receivers because the next couple rounds in fantasy football are really just...
Okay, well, I gotta add in my own video. Marvin Harrison did not live up to the hype. What I said did hold true. We were essentially drafting him at his height, at the highest potential he could possibly get. He didn't meet it. He was extremely boom bust for the entire year. He never really caught fire as far as consistency. He did face one of the highest double coverage percentages in the NFL as far as rookie wide receivers go, so you take that for what you will. I do think he will be a decent value next year, but this one was definitely a right take. But one of my stronger takes in the beginning of the year, you can kind of see it here, Deontay Johnson, he was going as the wide receiver 34. He finished as the wide receiver 86. Now, there's a lot that happened in between the end and the beginning of the year. I'll get into that at the end of this.
I'm sure you've heard enough people talk about this. 90% of fantasy football casuals will look at this and say, not again. I don't want anything to do with the Panthers off.
Maybe they weren't casuals. That's a strong word.
Bryce Young sucked. Their offense ranked 32nd in every metric. No. But that is not the mentality you can have in fantasy football. If you had that mentality, that made you miss out on Breece Hall finishing as the RB2, Mike Evans finishing as a top wide receiver as well. Deontay Johnson is the same receiver, the same guy who was a wide receiver 1 in 2021 with the Steelers. Elite volume. He's a great route runner. But what changed? Actually, a lot of important things changed. The coaching staff is already in love with him, and the Panthers made a good amount of coaching staff changes. They brought in Dave Canales. If we look at what he's been able to do over the past few years, he took Geno from a role player to a top quarterback in fantasy football and regular football as well. Left them, went to the Buccaneers, made Baker a player that's never been able to get his footing, never been able to be a top guy in fantasy, at least never top 25, turned him into a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Now, he goes to the Panthers with Bryce Young. Am I saying Bryce Young is going to be a top 10 quarterback? No, but we can also look at the facts. In the last few decades, there's only been 3 quarterbacks that were picked number 1 overall that did not pan out in fantasy football. Number 1, Trevor Lawrence. In his first rookie year, finished as the quarterback 29. His next year, finished as quarterback 11. Next, Jared Goff finished as the QB 32 in his first year. Finished as the QB 11 again. That third player, Bryce Young finishes a QB 31 last year.
So this take was kind of true to an extent. At the end of the season, the back third, ever since Bryce Young came back from being benched, he absolutely exploded and did amazing. Only problem is that Diontae Johnson wasn't on the team at that point.
He's going to be a lot better. He's got a coaching staff around him that can produce. That's going to help Diontae a lot. Last year, Bryce had no weapons. It was Adam Thielen and a bunch of nobodies. That's not a top receiving core. Now they have Xavier Legette. They obviously have Diontae Johnson going as the wide receiver 38 in the 7th round. If you don't think he can beat that ADP, you're actually crazy. But moving into round 8, this is where...
So if we're being real, when he was still with the Panthers, this take was still kind of right. Like, he had multiple 10-plus target games. He had 3 touchdowns in 6-7 games while the team was still terrible. This is still the Panthers that were 2023's Panthers. They were not scoring. They couldn't stay on the field, and he still managed to be a bright spot for them. Then he goes to the Ravens, never really plays. At that point, I was also saying he was a sell high. It happened to be true. Then he went just recently to the Texans, never ended up playing. He really did not play a single snap ever since he left the Panthers, so take this for what you will. It was not a good take, though, as far as that goes. But one I was called crazy for a million times in the comments is going to be Courtland Sutton here in this video. He was the wide receiver 40 being drafted in the year. New guy, Bo Nix coming in. He finished as the wide receiver 15. This was a hit by all means. Let's see where my head was in the beginning of the year.
That is a true league winner is Courtland Sutton, and I know before I even started doing the research on this, I just was not into it. I didn't like him last season. It felt weird. But there is actually a case to be made. Last season with Russell Wilson as the quarterback, not the best option. He finished as the wide receiver 35, and now we're drafting him as the wide receiver 44 this year, lower than he finished
Wide receiver 44, it's even worse.
last year, and that doesn't really make much sense. The situation is actually better, believe it or not. I know Bo Nix might not be the best quarterback, but Russell Wilson's season, I think Russell Wilson's a fine quarterback, but his season with the Broncos, the numbers can't get much worse. And now he has no target competition. Jerry Jeudy's on the Browns. His only competition is Josh Reynolds and Marvin Mims. If you know who those guys are, you must already know fantasy football pretty well, but the vast majority of people don't really understand who they are because they're not good. They're just role players. They are what they are. They're not going to be target comp for him. He still managed to average 13 fantasy points a game. He's going into his year 29 season. Not 29 years in the NFL, but he's 29 years old. Statistically, he's not out of his wide receiver prime yet. Possibly a better quarterback situation, and we're drafting him as a wide receiver 5 in the 9th round. It doesn't really make much sense to me. He's a potential wide receiver 1 for this team. Even if they're not great, he's better than a 9th round pick.
Now, this ended up being 100% true. His touchdowns did decrease a little bit from last year because they were extremely inflated, but the value and the usage that he had extremely went up from there. He was a good pick. By far, this offense was way better than a lot of people expected. But another one of my big misses here is going to be Javonte Williams. He was going as the RB23 in the beginning of the year, finished as the RB30. I said he was at value. Similarly, for the reasons that we were talking about Courtland Sutton, let's get into it right now.
Javonte Williams, and he completely flipped his narrative in the offseason so far. In the beginning of the offseason, people were saying he's not going to be a workhorse. He's really not built for that. They have some other options in the backfield. Well, no. The narrative with the beat reporters, with the coaches, they're saying he looks like he can take a huge role. He can be a 3-down back. He can be a receiving back. And Jaleel McLaughlin will not take usage from Javonte. Yes, he might still be using the receiving game a little bit. But again, like Zach Charbonnet, he's not going to take it. And if you really are worried about him taking some kind of usage, if you look at this Sean Payton's offense for the last 10 years, he has had the most condensed backfield with targets. Since 2013, all the way up to last year, his backfield has been top 5 in the NFL in targets out of the backfield per game.
Now, this kind of was similar. Jaleel McLaughlin did get a lot more work than anybody expected. Audric Estime as well. Tyler Bidet when he was healthy. Javonte Williams still averaged about 5 targets a game, even when he was not the clearest of RB1s.
The fact he's been doing it for 10 years, nothing's going to change. And if Javonte Williams gets that receiving role like he's slated and looks like he's going to get, he's going to way outperform this 8th round ADP. And you also can't ignore that Bo Nix has been looking amazing in camp, so that's also going to help you there.
That was also true. So again, we learned from this offense that as long as Sean Payton is out here calling plays as the coach, we're going to get every single running back possible in this offense. Again, we have Bidet, we have Audric Estime, we have Jaleel McLaughlin, Javonte. They all got touches. That's going to continue to happen. Javonte, not a value. It was still a pretty low pick in the beginning of the year, but the RB30 is just absolutely terrible, especially considering how good this offense actually was. But then we have my man, Jayden Daniels. No Commanders bias here. I said he was a value. He was going to be him. QB 15, 13, 14 coming into the year. Finished as the quarterback 5. Way better than everybody expected. The Commanders went from 4 wins to 12. Let's see where my head was at.
Jayden Daniels is the second player in this list. This is no Commanders bias. Trust me, I do not trust this team whatsoever, but Jayden Daniels is one of those players that can be absolutely amazing in fantasy, even if the team isn't great, kind of like an Anthony Richardson. Like I was talking about before, you want to be taking shots on these rushing upside quarterbacks. Yes, he has a lot of risk. He's going as quarterback 13 though. He's projected for 35 rushing yards a game and 5 touchdowns on the season. I personally think that 5 touchdown line is way too low, but 35 rushing yards a game, that's like 4 fantasy points extra on top of what he's going to already do. That's a safe floor. He was one of the best rushing quarterbacks in college football of all time. He has a great deep threat ability. He can thread the needle there, and that matches his play style with Terry McLaurin. They're lining him up outside the numbers more than they ever have, which means a lot of deep balls are coming his way, and Jayden Daniels is good at that. But in round 9,
again, also facts. The exact same thing we were talking about. Jayden Daniels, insane rushing upside. It kept him very, very high as a floor. And the offense with all the signings and the one-year deals that they got guys on with Austin Eckler, with Zach Ertz, the offense did amazing. Terry also was a beneficiary of that. He did good. But one of my more interesting takes of the year, I was talking about Devin Singletary in the pre-draft process as far as being a stable running back you can get if you need the points. We were not talking about him breaking out, being a top 10 running back. He could just get through the points, get out, and that's it. So let's see where my head was at. He started RB28 in the year, finished as the RB46. If you're already being drafted that low, it's a very, very impressive thing to finish as the 40, like 20 running back spots later. Let's see what was going on.
Wait. Before you click off this video,
I was not
give me a
cooking,
second.
apparently.
Let me talk about it. And if you are going to click off this video, subscribe on your way out.
Yo, I'm a finesser, bro. How am I putting in CTAs? And now we get to add in my own video.
Click stick.
I'm gonna edit this out.
But Devin Singletary will be the RB1. Yes, they did sign Tyrone
Kind of true. I'll get into that later.
Tracy Jr. in the offseason in the draft. I understand that. And he's an even deeper sleeper if you guys play Dynasty or you're in like a 32-person league. Tracy's a fine option. But you can get away with the waivers in week 6 if you want to do that. But Singletary by no means is no way washed up. He's only 26 years old. He's had pretty good, healthy seasons, and that's what I'm about to get into. If you look at his stats, he has only missed 1 game of football in 4 years. That is 1 game missed in 68 NFL games as the running back on its own. That is insane. He's the most experienced running back on this team. He's going to start as a workhorse running back. Maybe later down the line of the season, he'll start splitting with Tyrone Tracy. That's a worry for another.
Okay, that ended up happening. I'll let myself finish, but this is such an interesting take.
Though, we're talking about instant value, and maybe you can even flip him. Either way, there's no way that he loses 60% of his value. He's going to be that number 1 running back the entire way of the season. And obviously, we have the absence of Saquon, so there's going to be a lot of checkdowns. And if we know Daniel Jones, he doesn't really throw the ball that well, so he's going to need to check the ball.
The funny thing is with this take, so much of what I'm saying is facts. It just did not go to Devin Singletary. In the beginning of the year, he was like clearly the RB1. He was averaging over 15 carries a game. He got injured in week 5. Ever since he got injured, Tyrone Tracy came in. It was never the same. The receiving upside for Tyrone Tracy was there. Even Devin Singletary was averaging about 3-4 receptions a game when he was healthy. It just all went to Tyrone Tracy, and he was a top targeted running back out of every single NFL back when he was healthy. So take that for what you will. We'll keep going.
Down and just get the ball out of his hands. He does run a little bit, but that Saquon Barkley role is in the Giants' blood. It's just they need somebody to fill that in. By no means is this a great offense. I'm not trying to sell you on it, but the sports books have Devin Singletary projected for 745 yards on the year.
Yeah, I will tell you right now that absolutely smacked the under.
He's gonna get some kind of work. Maybe the touchdown number will be a little bit low because the Giants aren't great, but if you're looking for a guy in the 12th, 11th.
So yeah, he was safe. He got injured. It didn't end up happening. He finished as the RB 40 plus. Bad take all the way around. But one that I was building for the longest time, I was on this guy when he got drafted. It didn't happen his rookie year, coming into his second year, blah, blah, blah. Well, RB 43 coming into the year, finished as the RB 23, 20 spots higher, beat out Ezekiel Elliott for that RB 1 spot. We will get into this here.
Rico Dowdle, I thought that he was going to have a good amount of value, and this year might be the actual year where he returns that. Let's put this into perspective. Out of every single NFL team in the league, all 32, there are only 3 teams that don't have a running back being drafted in the top 120 picks. Those 3 teams are the Chargers, the Browns, and the Cowboys. And if we look at these teams and dive a little bit deeper into it, okay, the Browns have Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford injured. Who's going to play? The offense isn't great, whatever. If we look at the Chargers, they really don't have much going for him. Gus Edwards, yeah, he's getting old, I guess. They drafted another running back. I guess this makes sense. But then you look at the Cowboys. They have one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. Red zone, rushing efficiency, passing efficiency, just everything. They are a top 5 offense, and they really don't have a number 1 clear-cut running back now. They signed Ezekiel Elliott back, and then Rico Dowdle's the number 2. And then the question becomes, are you going to take the 6-foot running back, 225 pounds, 4 years of experience, explosive, who averaged 4 yards a carry last season? Or are we going to take the aging Ezekiel Elliott that's 28 years old, has injury history, got taken off the team just to get put back on the team, has been decreasing in efficiency every single year. He went from 3.6 with the last year with the Cowboys to 3.5 4 last year. And then again, the running back age drop off is 100,000% real. I know I talk about it a lot, but if we just look at the statistics behind it.
Fun fact, this year actually kind of disproved that fact. We have guys like Josh Jacobs, we have guys like Derrick Henry doing really good coming to new teams. That's not something we've usually seen before.
Since 2020, that's 4 years of data. Running backs in their age 27 compared to 28 season, they average 14.2 fantasy points a game at 27. And then when they get to 28, they average 11.8 fantasy points a game. That is 4 years of top running backs in the age 27 to 28 range of statistics and of data. It's just a given fact that running backs tend to drop off at age 28, and it's pretty obvious when we see Zeke play that he's not the Zeke that he was before. So because of that, Rico Dowdle is the guy that I want to buy in on.
Okay, this proved to be 100% true. After their bye week in week 7, he missed one game with injury in week 6, and in week 8 he was also dealing with that, didn't come back. In week 9, since the rest of the season till week 17 and 18, he had 70% plus of these snaps every single game. He also had 4 out of his last 7 games with over 20 rushing attempts itself. Completely the RB1 here. Maybe that changes if they draft another guy in the offseason. Ashton Genty might. I don't really think that's high of a chance, but still, he had the receiving upside. He was 100% a hit at this ADP. Again, I still didn't, and I still don't understand why he was being drafted so low. RB42, that's just disrespectful. But we'll go back to back with some of my big hot takes here. Chase Brown was my by far number 1 running back over Zach Moss. I'll get into it. He was being drafted as the RB. Wait. 33, finished as the RB10. If you isolate that last half of the season when he was the RB1, it's even better than that. I think the RB4. But let's get into what exactly we were talking about and yapping about in the beginning of the year.
Running back from the Bengals, that is Chase Brown. And everybody was on Zach Moss in the beginning of the season. I'm here to tell you that was never a thing. Zach Moss only had a couple good games with the Colts. You really can't, for running backs especially, take a couple game sample size and just think they're the best running back in the entire NFL. It's not true.
Facts.
I won't lie. In those games for JT when he filled in last season, he was a very good running back. But Brown has
Also
real
facts.
upside and breakout potential. Now, obviously, Joe Mixon isn't there. That's the reason we're talking about this backfield. But if we look at the play style of these two running backs and what the Bengals want to do, Zach Moss is more of a pass blocker. He's not super elusive. He's not super great athletically compared to Chase Brown. Now, yes, he is a young player coming into his second year, but he already had 1 year to get acclimated to this Bengals offense behind Joe Mixon. They got him a little bit of usage before. He wasn't great with it, but I do trust him to be this running back out of the backfield over Zach Moss in the long run of this season. And you also look at the fact that, yes, the Bengals brought in Zach Moss, but it was a 2-year deal for $3 million. That is backup running back money. That is nothing more than like a filler player that they need to pass block. But beat reporters and coaches from training camp and preseason are saying that Chase Brown is doing a lot better in pretty much every stat and every facet of football that they thought he was going to be. He looks like he's on the right trajectory to be that number 1 back.
We have to trust the coaches at this point. If they're saying that, it's almost all the time true. And we'll finish this out with one of my favorite takes here, Rachaad White. I was not a Rachaad White fan, even when he finished as the RB4 a few years ago. RB12 coming into the year, finished as the RB22. Not the biggest drop, but in running back terms, finishing outside the top 20 running backs is not a strong look.
Rachaad White, he's going as the RB12. His ADP is 32. That's about the second round of fantasy football drafts on average. But he's getting drafted next to guys like Brandon Ayuk, Derrick Henry, who I do like this season. Again,
Okay, I guess I could have put him in this video.
we'll hear of more in the videos later in the year, so make sure to be subscribed for that. But if you just look at this picture, it doesn't make any sense. Last season was a pretty interesting season for Rachaad White. He finished with the second most touches in the entire NFL as far as running backs go. Only 3 behind Christian McCaffrey. He was at 336. Christian McCaffrey was at 339, and he still finished as the RB8 despite CMC finishing as the RB1. Now, yes, the offensive lines are different, teams are a lot different, but still, he had the same amount of touches Christian McCaffrey had last season, and he finished 120 fantasy points lower than Christian McCaffrey. And even lower if we're counting half PPR standard leagues because he got a lot of his work in the receiving game. Now, I know he still had a great season last year. He finished way above his ADP again as the RB8. But when you're pretty much tied with Christian McCaffrey for usage and you average 3.5 yards per carry and you only had 7 touchdowns on 401 carries, the efficiency is not there. He's not efficient. He was not efficient. And I know a lot of you guys can blame it. Oh, well, the offensive line wasn't good. There's a lot of things you can blame it on, but the underlying fact is that he's just not efficient. He's not. But nobody's really talking about Bucky Irving. I haven't heard literally anybody say his name before. He is the running back that they drafted to back up Rachaad White. He is honestly a pretty big deal in this backfield as far as fantasy football goes. Is he going to get an insane amount of work? A split backfield, going to get the receiving role, touchdown? Probably not. He's more of a thorn in Rachaad White's side.
Okay, well, that ended up being true in the beginning of the season. Absolutely not in the end.
But he's definitely going to hinder his fantasy production, especially considering he's not going to get the same amount of volume. It's just not going to happen. The coaching staff has said it. If you've watched any of the press conferences, again, pretty much the only reason Rachaad White was so good was because of his volume, and he still only averaged 14 fantasy points a game on probably the best opportunities. Irving is way better than Edmonds and Vaughn and all of the backup running backs that the Buccaneers tried to get involved last season. He's going to get some sort of production.
That ended up being true. Bucky Irving was one of the best waiver wire running backs in the entire fantasy football scene. I think finished as an RB15. Hall of Fame call by me, but again, don't like the victory lap. I just want to go over my take, see where I can improve, see what we can get to. And that is going to finish this video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around for the whole thing. I hope you guys got a laugh like I did. A lot of misses, but a lot of good hits as well. I will see you guys in the next video coming later next week. All glory to the man above.